Okay, everyone. Let's finish strong, shall we? Now, Louis CK is about to tell us his favorite president. And then there is the goodbye. So let's do it.
Is Nixon is my favorite.
Dude, he's awesome.
He's the best. And again, as a character,
Yes.
Nixon gave the country one great gift that I wish was like, I wish it was taught like the speech that Lincoln has on his monument and the ask not what your country and all that shit. The greatest thing that he did, because it speaks more to what Americans live, is that when Nixon was shamed and destroyed and had to leave office, he had to fucking resign. He had to give, after a couple of I'm not a crook and this is all bullshit, he had to go and say, well,
all right,
I'm gonna go. And
still not a cook, but I'm gonna get out of here.
Gerald Ford would take the oath of office at this time in this office, and he left. But before he left, he gave a speech to his staff, to the White House staff. That was impromptu. It was just on his way to the helicopter, and he's copiously crying in the speech. There's video of it that you can see. You have to try to find the whole thing because there's clips that you can find on YouTube. But I actually ordered from C-SPAN a DVD of the whole speech, and they're all bawling, the whole staff, and his family standing behind him. And he just tells them, "Look, don't." He's encouraging them. He said, "This is a tough moment for all of us." He said, "First of all, I don't want to discourage young people from being in public service." He was afraid of what would happen.
Has happened.
Yes.
He was right.
He said, don't be discouraged from public office. It's a great calling. And he said, and for any mistakes that we made and all everything that's happened, not one person in this administration gained financially from anything, from being here, left richer than when they got here. He made it first, so he defended everybody that was there, and then he just starts reflecting. He reads from Teddy Roosevelt's autobiography, from his diary, when Teddy's wife and mother died at the same night. They both died of cholera or whatever.
Yeah, he came home. His wife had given birth, or was going to, and he came home. I think he witnessed the birth. Then he went downstairs, talked to his mother, witnessed her die, then went upstairs to comfort his wife, and then she died. So yeah, he didn't have a very good time of it either.
On the same night. He was going from one room to the other.
Oh, yeah.
And they both died. And he was like at 21 or something. And he wrote this quote that was like, "The light has gone out and it'll be darkness forever." And he said, so he read it to his staff, and he said that's how he felt, having lost his wife and his mom. And he went on and had this incredible life. So he's trying to say, so he says, no, don't be discouraged. Never be petty. Don't hate your enemies, because that's when you'd start to destroy yourself. He gets it really introspective about everything that happened without talking about it. And then he says, it's horrible. He goes, he says, they'll never write a book about my mother, but she was a saint.
Oh, man.
And I think of her, like, one of his brothers had tuberculosis and they had no money. So she moved to Arizona where the air was better. And she was a nurse, wet nurse. She nursed other people's babies for money in order that her son could live in Arizona. And he talks about his father, who was a lemon farmer, who had a failing lemon farm, and then he was a switchman on a streetcar. And he just talks about his parents and what they did for him and all that shit. He just cries. Oh, it's fucking beautiful. But it shows you a man at the height of American experience, destroyed from that height, which is the worst thing that can happen to a person, is to get that high and fall. And he just went, here's how this feels. He just told the world, this is how this feels. This is what this looks like. Yeah. And here's all I can say. And then he went and then he left. Incredible. I mean, he was one of the most influential people in American history.
Yeah. He ended Vietnam, right?
Yes.
That was already about done.
He was fucking Eisenhower's vice president.
There's
Eisenhower didn't really care for him.
There's a guy we know that's a bit of a conspiracy guy, but he's been pretty correct on everything so far, and he's got a book coming out on Watergate.
Yeah.
Okay.
And about how that was a little darker than it seemed. Like
so
his
I knew
opponents,
a guy back when I was first living in the city as a comedian. There was a guy named Frank Gannon who had Frank Gannon wrote speeches for Nixon and was a very close friend of his. And weirdly, he became the guy who books the comedians on Letterman. And when I moved to New York back in 1990 or so, being on Letterman was all anybody wanted. So Gannon was the most important person in comedy at the time. And he was a strange guy who was very serious. And he would just come and he'd watch you. And if he liked you, he'd get Morty to come and maybe you'd be on the show. So he liked me. He never got me on the show, but he liked me. So I went to Letterman's office and met him. And I asked him about Nixon because he wrote, Nixon has one big biography called RN that Gannon co-wrote. And he told me that when you get a few drinks in Nixon, he says, the same people that got the Kennedys got me. It's the same people that got, he said it's the same machine that took out John and Robert,
Kennedy
came after him. He said they just couldn't use bullets anymore because it was getting too. They were
That's
on
exactly what we said. We said that without him.
Watergate was. He said Watergate was something that happened all the time. It was just like, and still does. I mean, it's not like oh my goodness. It's how things are done.
Yeah.
It's a safe with $1 million in it. What president doesn't have a safe with $1 million?
Yeah.
It was
so that's Nixon's story. That was Nixon's story. He didn't say it in public, because the same as he conceded the presidency to Kennedy, which Kennedy stole. I mean, everyone knows that his father took suitcases of money to delegations and stole the presidency, and Nixon knew it. And he was like, I'm not gonna. That's not good for the country to get into it. That's why he resigned instead of standing trial, and that's why he doesn't talk about that's the story, you know.
Yeah. That's a good most interesting president.
Most interesting, I think, to me. Yeah, I mean, Johnson was also a fascinating guy.
Yeah.
I remember coming home. I remember Nixon dying. I want to say I was in 7th or 8th grade. 94, 93, 94. Anyways, I remember him dying, and then I remember I came home from school and at lunchtime, and because I didn't live too far away, came home from school for lunch, and I was eating lunch, and I turned on the TV and sat down, and they had Nixon's coffin laying in state, and people were able to walk by, and I think the coffin was closed, if I remember right, and the flag was draped over the top of it, but people were coming by, and I remember sitting there just watching it, and I remember being so shocked because I had to burp, sorry. In my whole life, I think that was the first president that had died. And it was just kind of like, oh yeah, that happens to them too. I'm trying to think who went next. I don't remember.
Johnson was, and Reagan was kind of an empty-headed genius, incredible, knows how to just be. As long as somebody else is in the room, Reagan was brilliant.
I read Reagan's book. Is a biography self-written? An autobiography? Reagan wrote the book. And when you read a book by someone, you have to take it with, as they say, the grain of salt. Because, yeah, they're telling you what happened, but they're telling you from their standard or their viewpoint, And you have to remember that they may also not be telling you everything, because unlike Ben Franklin, you know, who told the story about ruining a marriage because he's trying to bang the guy's wife, presidents aren't going to be so open about the negative stuff. Like Nixon might have left that out, or, you know, Reagan would have left that out. So it's better to get a book that isn't written by said person. You get a book from somebody else written about them. And I don't want to read a book written by some Republican worked in the White House under Reagan and then writes a book about Reagan. I don't want to read that because it's going to be very skewed. I also don't want to read a book by a Democrat who hated Reagan. That's going to be skewed. I would like my information right down the middle. Tell me what they did right. Tell me what they did wrong. That's all I want to know. I can make my judgments based on how I view things, but I don't need somebody just slanting the view to one side to make it too happy or making it too negative. That's how I like to review things. And I lean more Democrat, but when I read a book about a Republican, I don't take political party into the association of reading it. I read them and I base everything in their time, and I base things that they did, bills that they enacted, based on what the country was going through at that time. Was it good for the country at the time? Was it bad for the country at the time? How did they do this? How did they do that? I don't judge them based on their political party. You can't do that. If that's the case, I would not like Abraham Lincoln because he was a Republican. I love the guy. I wouldn't like Teddy Roosevelt. I love the guy. I would like Andrew Jackson. I love the guy. Don't like his presidency. So there's a lot of things that you got to just take into consideration. You know, for me, how I review things. I try to be extremely fair when I read things. And I haven't really read a book about a president that I have disliked. Every book that I've read about him, I found things that I liked, found things that I didn't like, but ultimately I would still pay them respect with visiting a grave or something like that.
Not sure he had any thoughts. You know what I mean? There's people like that.
Yeah, he was like an actor that was like, I guess I'll be a Republican while he was there. And then,
he was a Democrat before he switched to Republican, Ronald Reagan.
Which was pretty admirable at the time, because he was, actually no it wasn't, because that was in the middle of the Red Scare. He was like one of the guys being like, you're a communist. And he just became the man.
My favorite film of Reagan is Larry King interviewing him after he was shot and saying, so how do you feel about this guy? And he said, well, I just pray for him. He's a sick man. He's just, you know, I found out later that he's sick. He's mentally ill. So we add him to our prayers. And we hope for the best for him. And he says it with this big
oh yeah, he's like, we're fucking that guy up. Yeah. Oh yeah, I hope he's doing good.
Yeah.
He's doing great.
Yeah.
I think that should be it, right?
Yeah, I think that's about enough.
You had fun.
Yeah, it was good. Why do you accusing me of having fun? Yeah, it was fun.
Thanks for doing it, man.
Sure. Thanks for asking. It's fun.
Goodbye.
Wow.
Yeah, let's just do that. Yeah, we're not going to do ads on the next one. We got to do ads on this
Let's do it, yeah.
Can't do ads on the next one.
No, dude.
In the middle of that, you can't drop an ad.
No.
So, Man Shane's Secret Podcast is brought to you by Hawthorne. I bet you think it really stinks in here. And it did. But now we've got Hawthorne. What the fuck? Dry as my skin.
Somebody touch me, I beg you.
So I'll rub you.
It's good. I haven't do their cologne. Maybe we should put on a lot of their cologne before we go to our other
to our friend's house.
Spray ourselves.
So make sure you're ready for anything or any.
Sorry, I'm getting past the ad and I'm seeing if they say anything else.
May 6th, I'll be in Manchester.
Okay. So, This is a little bit shorter, and whatever, but this one wasn't really talking about presidents so much as it was just kind of discussing their favorites. My favorite president. Okay, so my favorite presidents would be Teddy Roosevelt, Abraham Lincoln, Andrew Jackson. Let me rephrase this. My favorite presidents, people. Doesn't have to be just when they were president. It could be their whole life. Teddy Roosevelt, Abraham Lincoln, Andrew Jackson, George Washington. I'm probably going to go with Grant, but there are some honorable mentions. I did like Polk. I respected John Quincy Adams. If you know what, I'll end up naming all the presidents that I've read about. So anyways, I'm gonna end this here. This is fun. I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed this. So I'm gonna end this here. There's a thanks button. You can donate to the channel. You don't have to, but all donations are appreciated. You know how it goes. You can request things. They go to the top of the list. You don't have to. You can still request without donating. They just take longer. Subscribe to the channel. That helps. Give it a thumbs up. That also helps. And till next time, have a good day. Have a good night.